I have. Now, no mystery at all that the international coalition should be still engaged in degrading, as they call it, Colonel Gaddafi's military capabilities in the country. What I have is a correction of something I told you earlier, or not you personally, but I told Al Jazeera earlier about what we know has been going on in SIRTE. A group of journalists was there overnight, coming back. During their time in SIRTE during the day, they did not see any evidence in the portions of the city that they had access to. And of course, none of us had the ability to run around freely. But in the portions of the city they had access to, they did not see huge evidence of rallying and mustering of forces. But that could have been because the deployment was on the Eastern Front, and they didn't go near there. What they did see on the way out of the city was lightly armed men with Kalashnikovs, with machine gun mounts in mobile SUVs coming in, and tanks, I said going in, but in fact they were coming out, which would suggest that what they're aiming for is fewer targets like tanks, which they know that the International Alliance can easily pick out with their surveillance and targeting, taking those away from the risk of being damaged tonight, and moving men into the city who might be in a position to engage in much closer quarters combat. For example, within the city perimeter itself, which you'd expect. Now, the new stuff I have for you is about MISURATA, a city which has been engaged for days in very heavy bombardment and shelling. We've heard some horrendous stories, some very distressing phone calls coming out of that city about what's going on, many casualties, hospitals overwhelmed, and so on. Now, a group of journalists were taken in today, keen to go because this afternoon state television started reporting that MISURATA had actually fallen to control of the government. So a group of journalists were taken in. I've just spoken to one of them by phone. They said they saw very, very little of the city at all. They came in on the southern side. They moved through the perimeter of the city. They were met with the usual cheering pro-Gaddafi crowds. These events are, I have to be quite honest with you, invariably stage managed. They arrived at the closest point to the center of the city where we know the fighting was. They were on a point down south on Tripoli Road, and that was at least a mile and a half from the center of the city. There again, the cheering crowds, but also signs of combat, sounds of combat. So the claims by the government to have retaken MISURATA, not actually able to be in any sense substantiated. In fact, quite the opposite. It looked to them like they were being taken to one corner of the city where there is a little control, but the battle is still going on in MISURATA.
Yeah, Anita, so difficult, isn't it, for international journalists to establish exactly what is going on at the moment, and also a great deal of concern still being expressed about that woman who came into the hotel where the international journalists were gathered and claimed that she'd been raped by Gaddafi soldiers. Do we have an update on where she is, how she is?
Well, we do, and it's quite a remarkable one. I cannot stress how unprecedented this event is in a Libyan context, because this woman took every risk. She clearly felt she had nothing left to lose but to throw herself at the mercy of the Western press to get a hearing. But then the backlash started, and the character defamation job done by her, on her, both covertly and overtly by the Libyan Authority rolled out. Late last night, we were all told that she'd been released from she had been in with the Libyan Authority. She was home with her family. That was not true. And today, her mother and father gave an interview to Al Jazeera Arabic. And her mother, well, don't take my word for it. Listen to what her mother had to say.
My daughter Iman was assaulted by the unjust. She's telling the truth. I do not feel ashamed of her. I'm holding my head high for her, simply because she broke the barrier no man could break before. My daughter is held captive by the unjust criminal traitors, Muammar Gaddafi and his followers. Where are you, the youth of Tripoli? Where were you when Iman was kidnapped before the cameras? She wanted to show the world what is happening in the east, at Jazeera, Benghazi and MISURATA. Rescue her. She and 6 other people are held captive. Yesterday, deep in the night, I received a phone call from Bab al-Azizia. They told me, make your daughter change her statements, then she will be released, and I would receive money, a new house. I spoke to my daughter and told her, keep silent and hold steadfast. And she said, this is what I'm doing.
Felicity, I can't really explain to you how extraordinary this is. This family, far from closing in on itself at a time of tremendous stress, has in fact, in a personal sense, declared open defiance against the government here. This just doesn't happen. This is a very closed society, women and men kept very separate. Libyans say to me, we're not quite like Saudi Arabia is, but we're not far off that end of the spectrum. And for a family to go public like this, to defend their daughter's honor, not only that, but to talk about how they have come under pressure from the government to change her story. We just don't see behavior like this in Libya. This is something quite remarkable.
Yeah, truly amazing to hear those words from the family. Anita McNaught reporting live there from Tripoli. Thanks, Anita.